Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Fallen London. Today we're going to be carrying on with the exceptional story, The Stripes of Wrath. And I think the first thing we're going to do is visit the Labyrinth. It is one location in London where tigers are plentiful. The Labyrinth of Tigers. Let's seek out someone in authority. The banded sleuth will not accompany you. Keep my name out of it for now. Best you haven't talked to me. I advise going straight to the keeper. Reduces the likelihood you'll end up as an exhibit. You and the urchin detective board a hansom to the Labyrinth of Tigers. She is unusually quiet during the journey. You could write it off as fascination with the scenery, but you see she is biting her lip. After a journey through unhurried bureaucracy, you secure a few minutes with the tiger keeper in his office within the first coil of the labyrinth. The tiger evaluates you from the comfort of a pile of velvet cushions. Then he offers you a pipe with a scent that recalls surface oranges. How can I help you? Okay, well, let's ask him, why would a tiger attack the Shroud? Tigers and the Shroud supposed to be allies? I believe you are confusing us with our smaller cousins, the keeper says. Although we are allied, in a way. You give him time to elaborate. He does not. After the silence becomes uncomfortable, you ask again why a tiger would take against the Shroud. Have you considered that the incident may be something of a theatrical review? They are terrible hams, after all, and I'm sure the tickets are overpriced. Have any tigers gone missing lately? Would he notice if one was absent? Missing? Missing? King of cats, I take it you have no experience of managing a zoological establishment. All our exhibits must be monitored and checked throughout the day, and that means that our staff roster is meticulous. The absence of a single tiger could throw us into chaos. Hyenas and penguins roaming the halls. Ridiculous. He leans back and takes an extraordinarily long draw on his hookah. The pipe bubbles merrily. Okay, so what does the keeper think has happened? It still looks like a tiger devoured a harmless performer. The keeper puts down the hookah pipe and leans forward. He extends a thoughtful claw. We are not far from Moloch Street here. Lots of development lately with all this railway talk. My guess is that someone has looked at our real estate and seen the opportunity for profit. Today, it's outrage in the press about tiger violence. Tomorrow, the proximity of the labyrinth is suppressing property prices. Eventually, moving us out past healing will be seen as sensible and safe compromise, and the existing coils will be converted into luxurious accommodations for two-legged Londoners. He holds your gaze for a few seconds more. I pity the officials they send to evict us. Okay, well, I think it might be time for us to take our leave. This interview is concluded, Keeper says. Follow-up questions do not appear to be an option. Well, it seems wise to leave. This will move the story on. The Tiger Keeper taps the pipe coals as you leave. Once you've reached a safe distance, the urchin detective pulls your sleeve. Milady, I'm not sure that tiger was telling us the whole truth. Did you feel that too? You ask if she would like to go back and confront the Tiger Keeper in his den. Her mouth twists as she considers the prospect. No, he says eventually. Okay, well, it looks like it's time for us to go to a spiritual laboratory. This is the place where he made the sense for the mystic. You locate the address in a dark street, choked with debris. At the end is a broken lantern, which looks like it has been awaiting repair for several months. You find the door. It's locked, but the urchin detective is keen to show off her skill at illicit entry. She produces a jemmy and has the door open within a minute. You descend uneven stairs to a black cellar. The corridor turns, and in the shadowed room ahead, see a thin man bent over a workbench. Approach with caution. Is this the victim, somehow returned from the tomb colonies? The man straightens up and turns. Your lamp picks out a thin, pale face that used to grace newspapers. Old newspapers from many years ago. "I've found it," the honey-addled detective says. Although the detective is semi-retired, his sallow, honey-slack features are still capable of an occasional flash of animation when the brain is stimulated by a complex problem. You're seeing that now. The urchin stiffens beside you. "Is that the governor?" he whispers. Let's greet the honey-addled detective. What has he found? "No," he waves a dismissive hand. "I've been having trouble with a cough reflex and on certain varieties of honey. I've just isolated a protein from a lamplighter hypopharyngeal gland, which I believe I can inject to see off the problem." The detective's eyes drift to you. "You've been in Balmoral, I perceive." "Have you been to Balmoral?" No, because I don't have the railway." The urchin detective raises both eyebrows. Consider your response. "No, I have not been to Balmoral. The railway is something I still need to do and look into at some point." Your response seems to unsettle the detective. He draws his thumb across his forehead, pressing so hard that the nail leaves a red line. "Sometimes," he says, "I think I am dreaming when I am awake, and vice versa. The train of thought is not as simple as it used to be." He looks at you again and narrows his eyes. "You have been to Balmoral. You were asleep at the time. You will take a train of thought there once you have awakened." The urchin draws closer to you. As the detective looks away, he raises an eyebrow and silently mouths, "Is he crazy?" Perhaps the honey-addled detective can contribute to your investigation. You have time to take in your surroundings. The lab seems devoted to bees, with 2 small wooden hives and a variety of glass jars and tubes. In the momentary break from conversation, you notice a constant hum from the population of bees. It makes the air vibrate. Let's ask about the lab. Mazurka described this space as belonging to an introverted apiarist. Yes, the honey-addled detective waves a hand. "He's here somewhere. I assisted with a little trouble he had at Mahogany Hall. Something about a chorus girl and an elephant. He couldn't pay my fee, but offered to contact the dead on my behalf." He frowns, as if searching for a memory. "We settled for access to his laboratory, which I have found useful." The dead man is quite clearly not in the room. How long has the detective been here? Let's examine the equipment. It looks shabby, but specialized. Various vials of powders and liquids are clustered around the lab, labeled with enigmatic abbreviations. The majority of the laboratory is dominated by bees, mostly live ones. Many of the containers are connected by clear pipes to form a miniature transport network. Bees crawl around in seemingly purposeful ways. One route leads into the wall just below the ceiling, presumably to allow the bees to forage. On a closer look, there appears to be 2 species of bee. One is the familiar lamplighter bee, They emit a pleasant glow, but their sting should not be underestimated. The other is quite different, slow-moving, bloated, and with a tint of infernal red that catches the light as they move. "Milady, look!" The urchin detective is holding up a dead bee she gathered from the crime scene. It matches the second type of bee. Your finger brushes something sticky. Uh-oh. Let's ask him about the different bees before we tell him about his friend's potential death. He seems to be the surviving expert. The honey-addled detective indicates one transparent pipe. You, of course, are familiar with the humble lamplighter bee. You may also know that, if nurtured correctly, they produce a substance known as prisoner's honey, popular among a bohemian set for its inspiring and sensual qualities. It induces a dreamlike state. I myself use it to reach clarity on difficult cases. It's been a while since my last 3-spoon problem. An odd smile moves over his face, like a wave. The key ingredient in this process is a flower named the exile's rose. It only grows close to hell, which is interesting, because these other bees, he indicates the bloated, slow species, these are related to devils in a way I do not entirely understand. He produces a large, round, magnifying glass and peers at another, darkened jar. One more thing. A departed friend was crossbreeding the two species. I must investigate this aspect further. Draws up a chair and continues his examination. Tell him about the murder. He knew the man. The detective waves this heartbreaking news off with an airy hand. Yes, I know, of course. Look here. He was observing how the species interact. He taps a large jar with his walking stick. A lethal struggle has taken place inside the jar. The lamplighter bee has been torn to pieces. Wings, thorax, antennae, and an assortment of legs are scattered around the base of the jar. The remaining combatant meanders around the jar, occasionally bumping into the glass sides. The urchin sticks close to you and glances around the room. He said a dead fellow was still in here. You reassure her that ghosts typically haunt laboratories. Well, let's move on. Exiles, roses, and devilish bees. Perhaps the brass embassy would be worth a visit. You tell the honey-addled detective you are leaving. He doesn't look up. I wish to learn more about my client's interspecies breeding efforts, he says. But your case is of moderate interest to me. Once I have finished here, I will find you. You ask how he will locate you in a metropolis the size of London. I have my methods, he says. Okay, well, let's go to the Brass Embassy, one of my favourite places in London. Bee talk at the Brass Embassy. A deviless in an embroidered silk two-piece receives you in one of the embassy's public rooms. With molten eyes and a tantalizing smile, she offers spiced tea or a glass of brandy. Ask about the honey trade. Do the devils export it? Of course. The deviless broadens her smile. Londoners demand vast supplies of honey, particularly the Vale Gardens set. Who are we to deny them? And there are connoisseurs across the sea. I believe a small supply even makes it to the surface, though I doubt our honey is as effective under the glare of the sun. The devils must make a profit from the trade. Of course. Here in London we have to exist within the rules of the bazaar. Most of them, at least. And that requires currency. She leans in, confidential. The fuel expenses for this building alone would make your toes curl. I mean hair? I think I meant hair. Okay, well, let's ask about the exile's rose. They say it only grows beneath the white walls of hell. The deviless is away. Her smile softens from predatory to nostalgic. You should see it, he whispers. Petals as black as a heart, as deep as the surface sky. A scent of memory just out of reach. Thorns which grip and bite like the throes of ecstasy. Fields of ebony thrumming with bees. She lapses into silent reverie for a few moments. Then her eyes flick back to you. I hope you have no intention of travelling there. The rose fields are well guarded by the most imaginative and effective of our number. They lack my human touch. Is it your imagination? Has the room become hotter? The eyebrows of the Deviless draw a little together, hinting at a frown. Describe the bees. The honey-addled detective mentioned they had a link to the devils. Can this Deviless elaborate? Before you can answer, the urchin detective asserts herself. We found 2 types of bee, says. One were the regular honey kind, and one were big fat mean ones. Some had little signs on them. Look! She places her crime scene bee on the table. The smile remains on the lips of the Deviless, but all pretense at mirth drops from her eyes. Oh, she says, tell me more. The dead fella was making new bees. The urchin forms an X with her fingers. Cross-breeding them, the governor said. The Deviless sits back, staring at the urchin, fingers gripping the table. Tension builds in the room like a gathering storm. The conversation has become unpleasant. The Deviless's facade of humanity drops away. The lighting in the room gutters and something terrible trembles on her shoulders. The urchin squeals and hides under your chair. Tell me, the Deviless says. Her voice has acquired a buzzing tone. It is accustomed to obedience. Tell me where it is. Now, for anyone who doesn't know, devils are basically bees. It's a long story, but yes. So we can either tell her the location of the laboratory, it seems very important to her, or I can refuse to share the location of the laboratory. Devils shouldn't always get what they want. I am going to tell her, I think. I feel like they have some skin in the game, shall we say. Maybe they'd be more open to telling us what's going on. Hell works in mysterious ways. Maybe they won't, but I don't want to damage my relationship with Hell. Thank you. The words themselves taste combustible. We shall deal with it immediately. Outside, the urchin detective looks up, puts 2 pinkies in her mouth and whistles. Arthur, get over to this address, find a honey dipper in the cellar and tell him to cheese it. Devils is coming. A small boy with a permanently baffled expression slides down a drain pipe and grabs the paper Mazurka gave you. He nods and scrambles off, flat cap bobbing on his head. That was a tricky spot, milady. No mistake. I hope Arthur finds the governor in time. He gets distracted by horses and such. Well, let's check in with the banded sleuth. You find him skulking behind trees in Tyrant's Gardens, listening to the conversations of passers-by. Though I can share everything you know, full disclosure is the quickest route to a solution, but I can share just enough. Perhaps you don't completely trust this huge, striped killing machine. He is still the only tiger we have actually met in this new story. It's possible he is, in fact, a bad tiger. But I'm going to share everything I know. The banded sleuth nods as you summarize your conversation with the cabbie. It's a real nuisance. I must engage my own driver. He exhales ruminatively as you delve into the bee detail and its link to the crime scene. Cross-breeding, eh? Very dangerous in more ways than one. Good to hear that the old gent of Moloch Street is out and about again. I wonder what prompted that. You relate your interview with the tiger keeper. He nods, but makes no comment. What has he been doing? Well, you've been busy. The sleuth inclines his head. Come, he says, and springs onto a section of park wall. You clamber after him and extend a hand to assist the urchin detective, whose legs are a little too short without the assistance of a drain pipe. You cross the street. A phaeton driver notices the tiger and veers off around a corner. A passing costermonger darts into a pub. You slip into a back street as soon as you can. A sleuth walks without looking at you. Even without this newspaper hysteria, there have never been many tigers roaming central London. I made inquiries. From behind you comes the distinct click of a pistol being cocked. A female voice speaks with cool authority. Stop right there, it says. Lamplight picks out a grey-haired figure that one might reasonably expect to find sipping tea in a good but inexpensive hotel, and arguing over whether cream or jam should be applied to the scone first. The steel in her eyes says she would win that argument. The implacable detective, your tiger colleague says. You can almost hear him roll his eyes. Why is she involved? This is surely one detective too many. The constabulary is a limited resource, the implacable detective says. Officers have been pulled off every major investigation to roam the streets looking for homicidal big cats. Blackmail, arson, housebreaking, all are running unchecked due to the hysteria induced by irresponsible reporting. She takes a step forward. The inspector understands the direct approach. Interrogation, intimidation, and so on. Effective methods on the whole, but he's not a criminologist as such. He doesn't make a study of it. That's why Concord Square retains my service. No sudden movements, please. The gun remains level. Show me the lower surface of your right forepaw. Banded detective growls deep in his throat. On your other side, the urchin slowly raises one grubby hand. Fingers splayed. Wait. The police missed the broken claw, and the banded sleuth removed it from the crime scene. How does the implacable detective know the attacker had a broken claw? The implacable detective narrows her eyes. Then she nods. It's a fair question. She does not lower the gun. In days past, I was something of a traveller. I visited Port Carnelian and learned from the tigers there. We don't see much of it in London, but they are extremely territorial. Wherever I went, I was careful to negotiate my passage. She eyes the banded sleuth. What that means, of course, there are many territorial disputes, and those are resolved in the traditional way, with claws and teeth. I learned there how a tiger with an injured leg walks, enough to read it from bloody footprints, anyway. So Concord Square has sent their pawn to harass and impede a rival investigation, the banded sleuth sneers. Why would they want to prolong the situation? A pawn, dear? Those eyes flash with genuine anger. I can tell you're not a chess player. I'm a rook, at least. I'm going to suggest that he shows his paw. He can eat her later, when her back turned. Like this, create a distraction while the tiger disarms her, hopefully by removing just the gun rather than her entire arm. Let's suggest he follows along. While the four of you waste time with this standoff, the real killer may be at work elsewhere. You point this out to the banded sleuth. True, grumbles. With an exacerbated sigh and an exaggerated care, he raises his right forepaw. The implacable detective takes another step closer to make sure every claw is present. After a few seconds, she lowers her gun. Her eyes remain suspicious. A thin voice splits the stale air of the alleyway. I see you're still fearless when pursuing a case. I doubt even 3 hits from that pistol would slow the striped fellow sufficiently to save you. The honey-addled detective approaches. Inverness cape around his shoulders. His eyes have become a little glazed since you last saw him. The implacable detective waits for him to arrive. He does not seem entirely pleased to see him. Witness a meeting of the finest minds in deduction. You, the implacable detective says. I thought you would never again leave Moloch Street. The honey-addled detective favours his implacable counterpart with something anemic, which, in a previous life, might have been a smile. An inevitability and totally erroneous conclusion. No, I became aware of certain issues relating to the supply of prisoners' honey and decided to involve myself directly in the matter. Besides, his full complement of claws, our striated acquaintance here cannot be the murderer. Why ever not? The implacable detective says. I would like to know why too, the banded sleuth says. Because he was, at the time of the murder, meeting with me. The honey-addled detective's words hang in the air. The sleuth was meeting with him at the time of the murder? The implacable detective emits a distinct, heartfelt groan. It's query his alibi. The banded sleuth did not appear to recognize the honey-addled detective just now. How could they have met? The banded sleuth tilts his head to one side. No, grumbles. I was meeting with a Lady Bones matron. She wished me to conduct surveillance of her husband, the honey-addled detective says. Her husband, the honey importer. No, the banded sleuth recoils. That woman was not you. I'm afraid it was. The implacable detective gives a rueful shake of the head. Once he disguised himself as a Carganian artist just to paint a dreadful portrait of me. He charged me 5 echoes, or he took off the beard. Mister, the urchin detective pipes up, will you teach me to become a master of disguise like yourself? The honey-addled detective rubs his nose and looks at her. No, he says. There is a brief silence. The various participants in the standoff cough, scratch, or pick their nose as they stand in the alleyway. The quiet is broken by the sound of the urchin's stomach rumbling. Do we suggest relocating? It's been a long day. Perhaps the finest minds in deduction could find somewhere to sit down. The tiger and the urchin nod at your words. Perhaps a public house would provide sufficient room for rumination, the honey-addled detective suggests. We need somewhere we won't be overheard, the implacable detective says. Follow me. The finest minds in deduction are going to the pub. But with that, before we work over the clues, I think this is a good place for me to end this episode. So thank you all very much for watching. I am very much enjoying this, but then I am a huge Sherlock Holmes fan, and the detectives and all this, it very much intrigues me. It's very entertaining. I'm very much enjoying it. I hope you are too. But either way, like, subscribe, let me know what you think. Your comments are greatly appreciated. And thank you again to the members of the channel. It really does help me make these videos and keep the channel alive. It is greatly appreciated in this difficult time that we all find ourselves living in. But as always, I'll see you next time.